Hello and welcome to GCSE Organisation Part 1 with Mrs Castanera. If you open your booklet, you will see that there are some pages which are for revision. Okay, so feel free to come back to these and use them as you work through the booklet. There's a lot of helpful information, but for now we're going to move on from these pages. And then you'll get to a assessment or a self-assessment tool all about the different parts of the specification that you need to be able to do, and you can review them in the run up to the exams. Now this is more useful for when you are doing your revision, okay, but it's also a good assessment for you as you go through the booklet to check that you can actually complete each of these. So you should be able to define the term organ systems. You need to be comfortable doing that. Okay, and you need to make sure that you're working through each of these and going back and reviewing the things you don't know or you aren't confident with. This goes on to another page. And then we move on to our first lesson. So this is lesson 1, structure and organisation. Here this shows the specification content for what you actually need to know. And then we're going to start our lesson with the knowledge check. So I'd like you to pause the video whilst you answer the questions here, please. Okay, let's go through the answers to that. So, name 2 cell organelles. There's a number here on the page. Cell membrane, cytoplasm, nucleus, cell wall, chloroplast, mitochondria, ribosome, vacuole and plasmid. Any 2 of those is excellent. Which is bigger, a cell or a tissue? A tissue is bigger. A tissue is made up of cells. In fact, question 3, tissues are made up of collections of cells. Question 4, give an example of an organ system. So there are a number of these: digestive, circulatory, skeletal, lymphatic and immune, or just the immune system if that's how you put it, urinary, reproductive, muscular, respiratory, integumentary, which is your skin, endocrine, nervous and reproductive. Question 5, how do you define an organ? So an organ is a group of tissues that work together to perform a particular job or role or function. Question 6, what is meant by the term multicellular? So multicellular means made up of more than one cell. Okay, so make sure when you mark that, you give yourself a score out of 6 and put it on the page. Okay, so for example, you would write however many you got out of 6. Right, so we're going to move on to this lesson. So we're going to explain the terms cell, tissue, organ and organ system with examples and an understanding of scales. By scales we mean their scale in terms of size relevant to each other. Then we're going to describe the main systems in the human body, which we listed in question 4. So you'll need a highlighter for the next section, which is all about hierarchy. So hierarchy is the structure of organisation or levels, how some things are more important or higher up or at a different level to others. Any living organism on Earth is made of cells. In multicellular organisms, these cells require organisation to work effectively together. Cells are the lowest level of complete organisation and are the building blocks or basic building blocks of life. In multicellular organisms, each cell type has a specific function and is therefore specialised, such as nerve and sperm cells in humans, root hair and phloem cells in plants. Okay, so when different specialised tissues work together for a particular function in a similar structure, they are called a tissue. So that's when different specialised cells work together and they have a particular function and they're in a similar structure, then this is called a tissue. We can just join that all up if you like. And tissues often contain different cell types. Organs are groups of tissues, again working together to perform a particular job. And these are definitions here, and you will need to know these. For example, the stomach in the digestive system contains epithelial cells that cover the surface inside and out. Also, the stomach contains glandular tissue that releases hormones and muscular tissue that contracts and moves the foods around. All three of these types of tissue enable the stomach to carry out its function of digesting food. They work together. So here we have our stomach, okay, and it had those three types of tissue. It had epithelial cells with glandular tissue and muscular tissue, and they work together. So when the organs then form part of an organ system, they are and then the entire organism is then a group of organ systems working together. So there's very much a hierarchy here. I'm going to put this on paper. Only we're not going to do it on this page because there just isn't a lot of space. So we are going to go to the notes page, which you should be able to find, and it is page 14 in your booklet. Okay, so this is the student notes page on page 14. So we're going to make it like a pyramid, okay? So it's increasing hierarchy, so it gets more important as we go up. Okay, so draw an arrow like this, okay? And this is larger at this end, okay? Not only is it larger, it is also more important as well. So, first of all, at the very bottom of this pyramid, we have cells. Okay. Then above cells, okay, made up of cells, we have tissue. And tissue is made up of cells. Above tissue, what's made of tissue? Well, that would be an organ. What's made up of organs? Well, an organ system. And finally, what is made up of organ systems? That would be an organism. That's the whole living thing. Okay, so we can do that by example. Okay, there's lots of different cells and organs. So here we have, for example, we could have a cardiac cell in the heart. And let's write that in. So cardiac cells in the heart, they're just a piece of cell in the heart. The tissue then would be cardiac tissue, which is just a group of cardiac cells of different types, okay, and they are all grouped together to make up a chunk of the heart or a part of the heart. And then above that, the organ, well, the organ in this case would be the heart. And then the organ system would be the cardiovascular system. And the cardiovascular system contains the heart and the blood vessels. And then the organism, well, it could be a human. It could also be an animal. And so as you can see, the organisation of this is that as you go up, each of these things is made up of the parts below it, okay? And it becomes larger and it also becomes more complex. Okay, so what I want you to do is make sure you've got this written on your student notes page. Pause the video now if you need more time to copy that out, and then resume the video when you are done. Okay, so we're moving on to page 9 now, onto organ systems. So within the human body there are 11 major organ systems, and you'll need to know this. This is a list you need to learn, and you need to be able to give a brief explanation of what each system does and some examples of organs or tissues that you might find in that system. So, circulatory system, it moves blood around the body. It includes the blood vessels, so that is arteries, veins, and capillaries. Okay, and the circulatory system would also include the heart. We have the respiratory system. Okay, so that's the ventilation and movement of oxygen and carbon dioxide. So obviously this is going to include the lungs. We've got the digestive system. Okay, that's the breakdown and absorption of food, nutrients and water. So we're going to include the stomach and both the intestines, so the small and large intestines. Okay, next we have the excretory system. Okay, so this one removes waste from the body and toxic substances. So that's going to include our kidneys and our bladder in particular. Our nervous system, so that is sending and receiving signals between the periphery and the central nervous system. Okay, and that is going to include our nerves, our spinal column or spinal cord, and brain. And we've got the endocrine system. Because the endocrine system is all about hormones. So it's chemical messages called hormones. They're released and they travel around the body. So this system is going to include a number of glands, and it also uses the blood vessels as well. Blood in general, blood vessels. The skeletal system, so that is the bones, the structure that supports and protects the body. So that is going to include the bones. You have the muscular system. Okay, so the muscular system is muscles connecting tissues to bones and the contraction of these to allow movement, and that is obviously going to include all your muscles. The immune system, that's our defense system, so it's the body's defense system against pathogen invaders. So that's going to include your white blood cells and some other important areas in the body, such as the spleen. Your reproductive system, okay, so it's different in males and females. And the idea is that it's going to allow for genetically varied offspring to be produced. So that is going to include, depending on whether it's male or female, so you've got the ovaries, testes, etc. And then you've got integumentary system, which is the skin, the hair, the nails, the glands, the nerves. Okay, and that's kind of listed already, so we'll put skin. Okay, so you've got all of those, which is part of the human body. So what I want you to do next is make sure you've got all these notes written down. In fact, I'll leave that there so you can pause the video and write the rest of the notes if necessary. Once you've done that, I want you to watch this video here. Okay, follow that link, you'll have to type it in carefully. And then I want you to have a look at our flowchart we've already done on the hierarchy of organisation and see if what you think, if you can add anything to it, or if you think of anything else that you think should be added to it. Okay, once we've done that, we're going to have a look at scaling. Okay, but first pause the video, complete the activity of watching the video on YouTube. Okay, so scaling, moving on. The human body cells range in size from 30 micrometers, or micrometers, which is the sperm cell, to 100 micrometers, or 0.1 millimeter, which is such as your epithelial skin cells. Now, tissues will be larger and organs even larger again. Organs measure centimetre scale, with the liver being the largest organ, around 7 centimetre in women and 10.5 in men. The system is obviously even larger, with the digestive system measuring 9 metres in length when laid out in a straight line from the mouth to the anus. Of course, we're not 9 metres in length, it's all coiled up inside of us. Okay, so we're going to move on now. Keep this page handy because the next page, page 10, we're doing an activity here where you need to complete the table below listing the organ systems, their functions and their organs. So we'll do the first one together so that we're happy with this one. So the circulatory system. What's the function of the circulatory system? Well, it is listed on the previous page. And then what organs are part of that circulatory system? So the circulatory system circulates blood, it transports oxygen and carbon dioxide and nutrients around the body. What organs would that include? Well, the heart, the arteries, the veins, the capillaries, or just blood vessels. Okay, so I want you to have a go at the rest of this, please, and then pause the video whilst you do that, and then we'll mark them together. Okay, let's go through that then. So the circulatory system, as we said earlier, circulates blood, transports oxygen, carbon dioxide and nutrients around the body. So if you've written any of that, well done. If you're missing any of those things, please do add them to your work. You can absolutely have the mark if you've written some of it, but please do add to it. Make sure you have everything. And give it a tick to show you've got it right. Then the organs, the heart, arteries, veins, capillaries, or heart and blood vessels, that's fine. Again, you can tick it if you've written the right thing, but please do add to that answer if you've only written some of them. The next system is the digestive system, and it breaks down and absorbs food so that it can be used by the body, or it digests the food, which means breaking down. So tick it to show that you got the mark. Add anything you've missed, please. Then the system that sends and receives signals is the nervous system, and it includes the brain, spinal cord and nerves. Make sure you've written those all down. You can mark it if you've written one, but please do write the others as well. So the system that is made up of white blood cells and antibodies is the immune system, and it protects against infection. I'm going to pause that there so you can get all those written down. If you need to pause the video whilst you do that, please do so now. Okay, so moving on, we've next got the respiratory system, which facilitates gaseous exchange by moving air into the lungs and removing carbon dioxide. If you've written something like that, that's fine. So the idea that it allows oxygen into the lungs or air into the lungs and removes carbon dioxide. And the lungs, diaphragm and trachea are all organs that are part of this. If you've got one of those, that's fine, but please do add the additional answers to it. If you've got something you're not sure about, feel free to look it up or email your teacher. We're very happy to answer any questions or confirm whether you've got a question wrong or right. Lastly, the system that has glands, blood vessels, is the endocrine system. Now, this was a really tricky one, so well done if you got this right. Now, the endocrine system secretes hormones into the bloodstream to regulate bodily functions such as metabolism, growth and tissue function. So again, if you've got any of that stuff, even if it's just releases hormones, that's great, you can give it a tick, but please do add to your answer the additional information that's here. Okay, so I'll leave that for a minute just to allow you to finish writing out any answers you need. Pause the video if you need to do that. Okay, so now we're going to talk about plants and the hierarchical organisation in them. So plants have the same hierarchical organisation. The main plant organs are the roots, the stem, the leaf and the flower. And you can see each of those on most diagrams of a plant. They all have their own tissues, but some are common to all and some are specialised to one part. So for example, epidermal tissue, that is the surface tissue and it covers the whole plant. Okay, whereas the xylem and the phloem, they transport water, ions and nutrients, again, all around the plant. Meristem tissue is found at the tips of shoots and roots, and that is able to differentiate or change into different cell types to allow for plant growth. The flower is an organ that contains different tissue types as shown in this picture. So the flower contains petals, contains the female sex organs, which is the stigma, style and ovary, the male sex organs, which is the anther and filament. Now the male sex organs, the anther and filament, are called the stamen together, and the stigma, style and ovary together being the female organs, sexual organs, are called the carpel together. And then here we have the sepal, which is a little bit of left over from where the petals and all the sex organs were contained when it was originally just a bud on the plant. Now what you do need to know a little bit here is about the xylem and the phloem. So we need to know, what does the xylem transport and what does the phloem transport? Do you know? So the answer is that the xylem transports water and mineral ions. Okay, and the phloem transports sugar. Now, it can be tricky to remember these. So I've always thought, well, xylem begins with an X, and W is right next to X in the alphabet, so the WX is water, goes with xylem, and the phloem is sugar. It's just the other one is sugar. So WX for xylem is water for xylem. That's how I remember it. You can use your own method, that's fine. Okay, so we're going to have a look at the next page, page 11. Now there's a practical activity that obviously we can't do here because quite simply we're not able to do a dissection of the lungs at home. So what we're going to move on to here now is the knowledge check. So I'd like you to pause the video and have a go at the knowledge check, please. Some of these are questions from this lesson and some of these are questions from previous lessons. So have a go, see how you do, and we'll mark it together. So pause the video whilst you do that, please. So let's go through the answers together. So state the order of organisational hierarchy in a human. So it doesn't say whether it's from smallest to largest, but we'll start with cells. If you've done it backwards, that's fine. So it's cells, tissues, organs, organ systems, organism. Okay, you need to have at least 4 of those 5, okay, listed in the correct order, forwards or backwards, that's fine. Identify what a tissue contains. So a tissue contains similar cells, or a mixture of similar cells, that all carry out the same function. Make sure as you're working through this that if you've got it right, great, tick it. If you've got it part right, that's fine, but make sure that you add the information that you've missed. Or if you haven't got it, that's also fine, but please make sure you add the information that you've missed and make sure you learn those answers after the lesson. So state what a group of organs working together is called. Well, that is called an organ system. Now, who first used the term cell? Well, that was a man named Robert Hooke, okay, and he first looked at cells of cork down the microscope. State the function of the circulatory system. So it circulates blood, transports oxygen, carbon dioxide and nutrients around the body. So you might have part of this answer and that's great, but if you haven't got all of it, then you need to make sure you write those extra bits down, please. What piece of equipment is used to view cells? Well, a microscope. Define active transport. So that's not from this lesson, but you do need to know this. So it's the movement of molecules against the concentration gradient. And you should know that that requires energy. You don't need to put that in your answer, but you should know that active transport requires energy to occur. So it's the movement of molecules against the concentration gradient. State what the independent variable is. So the independent variable is the variable that you are choosing to change in an experiment. Okay, so give yourself a mark out of 8 for that, please. Okay, so give yourself a mark out of 8, as I said, and pause the video if you need to write down any of those answers still. Then we're going to move on to the next page, page 12, to the checkpoint question. So here we have our checkpoint question. Why is the human circulatory system a double circulatory system? So it's worth 2 marks. You say 2 separate things. Okay, so pause the video whilst you answer the question, please, and then we'll mark it together. Okay, so there are 2 statements here that you need to make. The first is the idea that, well, I'll read it to you and then we'll go through it. So the pulmonary circuit carries deoxygenated blood away from the heart to the lungs and returns oxygenated blood to the heart. Okay, so you need to basically explain here that the blood needs to leave the heart and go to the lungs to get oxygen. Okay, so that needs to be the first part of your statement. This is the correct way of writing it, and I recommend you all write this out on the notes page if necessary. If you don't have room, that's fine. And the second part of the circuit is called the systemic circuit. That's the part that goes around the body. And it carries oxygenated blood, so it's blood with the oxygen, away from the heart to the body, and then returns deoxygenated blood to the heart. Okay, so you need to have the 2 aspects here. The first circuit is blood with no oxygen going to the lungs to get oxygen and coming back to the heart. The second circuit is the blood with oxygen. It's already been to the heart, to the lungs. All that blood that's already been to the lungs. The second circuit is that blood going around the body, delivering the oxygen to all the cells in the body and returning without any oxygen, ready to go back to the lungs. So we've got 2 parts to that here. It would be absolutely acceptable if you drew a diagram to show that, as long as it was well labelled. So your diagram would want to show, and it doesn't have to be amazing, it would want to show a heart. Okay, that's a very crude rendering of a heart, but it'll be the heart. Okay, and there are 2 circuits here. Okay, so we've got to the body and we've got to the lungs. Okay. So that could be the basics of your diagram. Doesn't need to be special, doesn't even need to have pretty shape. And then you would need to put some arrows on here to show the direction. You would also need to indicate that this is deoxygenated, going to the lungs, and oxygenated away. And then from the heart, you would need to say that this is oxygenated towards the body and deoxygenated on the way back. So either of those answers would be sufficient for the marks. Okay, so now that we've done that, pause the video if you need to write anything down or draw anything, that's fine. And then we'll move on to the exam question practice. Okay, so there are some questions here. Okay, this is question 1. And then on the next page, we have question 2. Okay, so in fact, we don't have question 2, we have question 1A and B, in fact. So I'd like you to work through these questions, please, all the way along down page 12 and onto the next page and finish the questions, please. So pause the video whilst you do that, and then we will mark them together. Okay, so let's review those. So the image below shows some cells lining in the lining of the stomach. There is A and there is B. And then we have the nucleus that's labelled. Use the words from the box, which is here, to name structures A and B. So A is the cell membrane and B is the cytoplasm. Okay, so if you got those right, well done, give yourself 2 marks. Alternately, write in how many marks you got for that, please, just next to the 2. Next question, what is the function of the nucleus? Okay, so you have to just tick 1 box. So is it to control the activities of the cell? Well, yes, it is. It is not to control movement of substances into and out of the cell. That's the cell membrane. And it is not to release energy in respiration. That is mitochondria. Okay, so if you've got that one correct, give yourself a mark. Well done. And then we're going to move on to the third page, or sorry, the next page, the third part, which is here. So draw 1 line from each part of the human body to the correct scientific name. Now, 1 line was in bold Believe it or not, sometimes people do draw more than one line. Okay, please don't do that because you will lose marks. So, from the parts of the human body, which is layers of cells lining the stomach. Well, the layer of cells lining the stomach is a tissue. So give yourself a mark if you got that correct. The stomach is an organ. And the mouth, stomach, intestines, liver and pancreas is an organ system. That's the digestive system. Now, we don't have an organism here, so there should be absolutely nothing attached to that box. Okay? If you have attached something to that box as well as the other three, then you're going to have lost a mark. Okay? So for each of these correct lines, you get 1 mark. Up to a maximum of 3. Now, that was 6 marks in total available there. So give yourself a mark out of 6, please, at the bottom of that. Excellent. And at the end of this lesson, we've just got a couple of bits to review. So here we have our keywords, and I strongly recommend that you learn each of these. They're very important definitions, okay, as well as each of the 11 different organ systems that you have, and a brief description of what they are, what their job is, as well as what they're made from, what organs are in those organ systems. And that concludes our lesson today. If you have any questions, please ask your teacher. Feel free to email them, and they will be very happy to get back to you and support you in anything you need questions on. And don't forget that you probably have homework on Educate, so please look into that. Thank you.